Welcome to your channel NightVeil Stories. Emma never believed in haunted houses until she moved into the old Victorian mansion perched on the edge of the sleepy town. The moment she stepped inside, the air felt colder, heavier, as if the walls themselves were watching her. In the attic, tucked into a dusty corner shelf, sat a small porcelain doll with cracked cheeks and hollow eyes that seemed almost alive. At first, she dismissed it as an old toy left by previous tenants, but there was something unsettling in its gaze, a sharpness that felt too deliberate for a doll. That night, as rain pounded against the windows and shadows danced across the wooden floors, Emma heard the faintest creak, a whisper of movement. She told herself it was just the house settling, yet deep down, a shiver crawled up her spine. When she peeked back into the attic, she swore the doll had turned to look at her. Its eyes reflected a knowingness that no porcelain should ever hold. Emma tried to ignore it, burying herself in unpacking boxes, but the sense of being watched never left her. By midnight, she began to feel the weight of countless invisible eyes tracking her every movement. A sudden chill brushed past her neck, making her gasp. Something unseen had moved in the shadows. She glanced back at the attic, half expecting the doll to be gone, but it remained, perfectly still yet impossibly menacing. Every corner of the room seemed to stretch unnaturally, and the house itself whispered secrets she could not comprehend. Emma felt trapped in a web of quiet dread, unsure if she was truly alone or if the doll's gaze had somehow reached into her very soul. That first night, the boundaries between reality and nightmare blurred, and the doll, innocent in appearance, began its silent vigil, patiently waiting for her to notice it completely. The following days in the Victorian house grew increasingly unsettling. Emma tried to convince herself that she was imagining things, but the evidence was impossible to ignore. Small objects shifted from one place to another, as if invisible hands had touched them. Doors that she had firmly closed creaked open slowly, and sometimes, she would hear a faint whisper in the hallway, a voice that seemed to call her name. The doll, which she had initially left in the attic, began to appear in strange places around the house. One evening, as Emma settled into the living room with a book, she blinked, and suddenly, the porcelain figure was sitting across from her in the old armchair, staring with its unnerving lifelike eyes. Heart pounding, she froze, unsure if she was awake or trapped in some nightmarish hallucination. She reached out cautiously, but before her fingers could touch it, the doll tilted its head, almost mocking her hesitation. Emma's rational mind fought to explain it away. Perhaps the wind had moved it, or maybe she had placed it there without realizing. Yet the heavy silence of the room contradicted every logical explanation. Shadows lengthened and twisted unnaturally along the walls, and the air carried a subtle chill that seemed to seep into her very bones. That night, sleep eluded her as she lay in bed, listening to the faint scraping of tiny feet along the floorboards, a sound that seemed to vanish whenever she opened her eyes. Every reflection she caught in the mirrors hinted at movement behind her, and she began to question her own perception. Something in the house was alive, something malevolent and patient. Emma could no longer deny it, the doll was not merely an object. It watched, it waited, and the longer she stayed, the more she felt it creeping into her mind, planting a creeping dread that would not let her rest. By morning, the once empty rooms were infused with a sense of quiet, oppressive anticipation, as though the house itself held its breath. That night, Emma woke to a chilling sensation. The room felt heavier, darker, as if the shadows themselves had thickened. She turned over in bed and froze. There, at the foot of her mattress, sat the doll, its tiny porcelain hands folded neatly, eyes gleaming with an unnatural awareness. Her heart thumped violently. She reached out with trembling hands, and as her fingers brushed the cold porcelain, the doll's head slowly rotated, turning to face her fully. She screamed, a sound swallowed instantly by the oppressive silence. Then, the air shifted. A sudden gust of icy wind circled the room, rustling curtains and rattling old furniture. Emma's vision blurred, and the ceiling seemed to bend, stretching unnaturally above her. And there it was, the doll, standing atop the ceiling, upside down, staring down at her with those impossibly human eyes. Panic surged, yet she couldn't move. It was as though the doll's gaze had rooted her to the spot. Her reflection in the mirror across the room flickered, and for a fleeting moment, she saw the doll standing beside her reflection, mimicking her every twitch and breath. The room became a distorted labyrinth of shifting shadows and whispers that she could not comprehend. Every step she imagined taking felt blocked by an unseen force, and the temperature dropped further, frosting the edges of the mirror. Emma realized with dawning horror that this was no ordinary doll. This was something ancient, something patient, something that could reach beyond its porcelain shell to manipulate the space around her. Every instinct screamed to run, yet her feet remained frozen, and the doll's stare grew heavier, almost sentient. The night stretched endlessly, a tormenting cycle of terror and helpless fascination. When the first pale light of dawn crept through the curtains, Emma's body was tense, her mind teetering on the edge of madness, but the doll remained, its silent vigil unbroken, as if it had claimed her very awareness, waiting for the next to continue its quiet, terrifying game. As the nights wore on, the house seemed to close in around Emma, each room a cage of creeping dread. Every exit she tried led her back to the same hallway, the same dusty foyer, as though the house itself were alive and mocking her. The doll was always nearby, its expression shifting subtly, smiling one moment, frowning the next, then staring blankly, each change more sinister than the last. Objects flew across rooms with silent precision, doors slammed violently, and a chorus of whispers, soft and chilling, echoed through the halls, calling her name in tones that made her blood run cold. Mirrors became portals of terror, reflecting not her own movements, but those of the doll, always behind her, always watching. Emma's mind teetered on the brink of sanity as shadows twisted and lengthened unnaturally across the floors and ceilings. She felt the weight of invisible eyes following her, pressing into her skull with suffocating insistence. The air smelled of decay and something sweetly metallic, a scent that made her stomach churn. She tried to scream, but her voice dissolved into a void of silence. Her hands shook uncontrollably as the doll appeared at the end of the hall, slowly moving closer, its porcelain face unreadable yet infinitely terrifying. Each heartbeat echoed like a drum in her chest, matching the cadence of the whispers that seemed to pulse from the walls themselves. She realized then, with a despairing clarity, that the doll did not merely observe, it controlled the very space around her. The house, the shadows, the air, even her own reflection were under its dominion. Emma felt herself slipping into the house's embrace, an inescapable descent into terror orchestrated by the lifeless yet sentient eyes of a porcelain doll, whose patience had stretched over years, waiting for another mind to claim, another soul to haunt. The walls closed in, the shadows danced, and the whispers grew louder, until Emma understood, there was no escape. On the seventh night, Emma knew she could no longer avoid it. The doll's silent vigilance had consumed her every thought. "What do you want?" she demanded, voice trembling as she held the porcelain figure tightly. Its glassy eyes seemed to glimmer with an intelligence beyond comprehension. For a moment, nothing happened, then, very subtly, the doll's cracked lips moved, forming words that she could not hear, like a whisper carried from another world. Suddenly, the house shuddered violently, as if enraged at her challenge. The chandeliers swayed, furniture shifted, and the air became thick with an almost tangible presence. Emma dropped the doll in terror, and instantly, every light in the house extinguished. Darkness enveloped her, heavy and suffocating. In that void, a single pair of glowing eyes appeared, hovering where the doll had fallen. The whisper came again, sharper this time, "Stay with me, forever." Emma's scream echoed through the house, swallowed by the darkness. When morning came, neighbors reported the house completely silent, with no sign of Emma. The windows were closed, the doors locked, and the air was unnervingly still. Inside, the only witness to the night's horrors was the porcelain doll, sitting innocently in the corner, its eyes glimmering with a knowing, sinister smile. As if it had claimed another soul, it waited patiently for the next inhabitant, for the next unsuspecting mind to haunt. The house remained a timeless trap, a living nightmare, and the doll's silent gaze continued to pierce through reality itself, promising terror for anyone daring enough to enter. No one ever knew exactly what happened, but the legend of the doll grew, whispered in fearful tones throughout the town. Emma's disappearance became a warning, yet curiosity would always lure someone new. And the doll, it would be ready, watching, patient, eternal.